Hi everyone. In our previous video, we've been talking about a sense of containment. I'd like to illustrate this with a few stories. A sense of containment is the child's sense that the adult can stop them if they are doing a wrong thing, and if there's a right thing that they're supposed to do, that adult can get them to do it. I think some people have an almost unfair advantage here. Thinking of a time when I conducted a peace discipline workshop at an institution for adolescents with the staff there, and they were talking about the problem of aggression amongst the students and how sometimes when these students were aggressive, they would need to send them to a timeout to prevent them from hurting other children and to give them a chance to cool down. The problem was getting them to go to timeout. When these teenagers were very angry, sometimes they would resist going to timeout. And here's the thing. If you are a nurse on duty and the teenager that needs to go to timeout is bigger than you, it's quite difficult to get them to go to timeout. If they resisted and the nurse intervened, sometimes the nurse would end up getting assaulted. And this was a real problem in that organization. So we were talking about this and how to deal with it. Now, sitting next to me was a man that was working there on a temporary basis. I think his name was Justice, and maybe that has something to do with it. You'll see now why. Justice was a man who was both big and tall, a gentle giant, soft-spoken, but very, very big. So when I asked him, so what's your experience of taking children to timeout? He said, no, I have no problem. I just go and I stand next to them and I say, do you want to go by yourself? Or do I need to help you? And they all say, I'm going to go by myself. This was definitely not the experience of the other people who were trying to get children to go to timeout. And I think again here we can see this principle of a sense of containment. In this case, perhaps a rather primal physical sizing up of the person who's asking you to go to timeout. These young people would look at Justice and reckon, if I get in a fight with him, I won't win. I think it's as simple as that. I won't win. And I'd like to repeat here that Justice was a gentle giant, soft-spoken. He wasn't using any undue force. But if they resisted physically, he would definitely be able to stop them. Perhaps he didn't need to prove it. They just looked at him, sized that up, and decided to cooperate. Now, for most of us, we need to work a little bit harder to achieve that sense of containment. We need to show children when they test us that we can manage their behavior. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, how do we do this? This is not an easy question for people who come from what I call a punitive background. In other words, if you were punished harshly yourself as a child, it can be hard for you to picture how to achieve a sense of containment in a nonviolent way because you don't have a model of nonviolent discipline. So let's just stay with that for a minute. If I were to ask you, did you have a sense of containment as a child? Some of you would say, yes, you did. You remember that you did have a sense of containment with a parent or at school with the teachers. The problem is how that sense of containment was achieved. So some of you would say, oh, I would never have been disrespectful because I wouldn't have got away with it. And what you mean by that is you would have got a hiding. You would have been beaten or hurt in some way. Now, the confusing thing for parents and teachers who have a punitive background is that we remember the sense of containment and we have a sense that that was a good thing. It was a good thing. It was a good thing that you had a sense of containment. But the methods that were used were not always good. In fact, they had side effects. Some people will say, oh no, well, I turned out okay. Let me challenge that by saying that even the fact that you are considering that it might be okay to hurt a child to achieve a sense of containment is a side effect of the punishment you received as a child. Because if you hadn't grown up with that, you would feel that it was violent and abusive to hit children. One of the effects of being hit as a child yourself is that you start to think it's okay because that was your normal and because people you loved, people whose example you followed, did that. So it can be confusing when you think back on the sense of containment you had, which was a good thing, and then remember the methods that were used to achieve that. Be honest, sometimes you wonder, will our children turn out okay if we don't hit them? I often hear parents or teachers say things like, yes, I was hit as a child, but it worked. It works is not a good enough reason to use something. We have to think of the side effects of the method too. For example, in the 1950s and early 1960s, a medication called thalidomide was used to treat pregnant women for morning sickness. It worked. Patients who took this medication did not feel as sick, but when their babies were born, there were severe birth defects. They took the drug off the market. It would have been unthinkable to keep giving this drug to mothers knowing how it affected the baby. In the same way, it should be unthinkable to continue using harsh methods on children when we now know how many negative side effects they have. Just as doctors needed to find a different solution for morning sickness, we need to find different solutions to achieve a sense of containment in our children. And I'm happy to report that nonviolent discipline skills work extremely well to help children develop a sense of containment, and they don't have the same side effects as the harsh methods that we grew up with, such as children feeling less safe with the very people they need to feel safe with, or learning to lie and deceive their parents and teachers to get out of trouble. So how do we achieve a sense of containment? What can we do instead of hitting? And is it as effective? If you're not familiar with discipline skills, you may find that you're trying to stop your child's behavior and not feeling very effective at all. I'm sure we've all seen this happen, where perhaps a child is doing something aggressive and then mom or the dad is saying, now sweetie, you know that's not nice, or you know it's wrong to hurt people, but that's all they're doing. There's no other consequence, there's no other way of reining it in. And you'll notice it's often not very effective at stopping the child's behavior. Sometimes parents try to stop their children's behavior in ways that are just not containing at all. One day we were at Kirstenbosch, which is a beautiful botanical garden here in Cape Town. It was a beautiful day. We were sitting on the grass under a tree having a picnic, and another family came walking by. As they walked by, they saw that there was a rabbit hopping around between the bushes, which was unusual. We don't usually get rabbits in Kirstenbosch. There was a young boy with them. This boy was fascinated with the rabbit and started to move closer and closer to it. His mother did not want him to go any closer, and here's how she tried to stop him. Razit, Razit, that rabbit is going to swallow you. He's going to swallow you. She didn't say bite. She said swallow. And this made me laugh because Razit, probably 9 or 10 years old, was quite big for his age. And the rabbit was a little fluffy thing like this. You could see that Razit didn't really buy that the rabbit could actually swallow him. He looked back at his mom and continued in pursuit of the rabbit. So, that rabbit's going to swallow you? Not very containing. Now, I can understand how examples like this might make you nervous. You might think, if we're not going to hit children, is this what we're left with? But I use this example specifically to show something that's not containing. I'm not suggesting this is an alternative. I'm suggesting that often parents do things which are not containing at all. And then they say, well, hitting is the only thing that works. I think that adults who fear that children will go out of control if we don't hit them are actually onto something. They're not right about needing to hit children, but they're remembering a sense of containment that they had as children and wondering if other methods will be able to achieve that. The good news is that we can achieve a sense of containment with skills that work even better than the skills that were used on us as children. There are a number of skills we could use in different situations, and the best skill to use is the one that matches with the needs and signals of the child. You can pick up here that I'm speaking about attunement. Let's look at 1 or 2 examples. Remember that the child's sense of containment is about knowing that if I'm doing a bad thing, then the adult can stop me. So, for instance, if a child is being aggressive and hitting or hurting people or bites somebody, and the parent sends them immediately to timeout or picks them up and takes them to timeout, even though the timeout may be short, it has acted to stop that behavior. So that's more containing than saying something like, you know it's wrong to hurt people and doing nothing else about it. Or perhaps a child was going out of bounds and the parent literally stopped them going out of bounds by insisting that they play indoors for a while. In effect, they had a timeout from playing outside. They didn't have to sit alone in a room or anything, but their freedom was limited for a while. That's another example of a containing action, something that stops a child from doing something bad. We can also think of something like making amends, because when a child has to make amends for something that they have done wrong, they're not left with a sense that they got away with their behavior. Their wrongdoing incurred responsibility. they had to put right. They had to do something for the person that was affected by their wrongdoing. So there we can see another aspect of containment. The child doesn't feel like they got away with it, because they didn't get away with it. They incurred responsibility. They incurred some work to put right what they had done wrong. Reward systems can also have a containing effect. If a child is unmotivated to do something and then a reward motivates them to do that thing, then the child has experienced the parent being able to get them to do something. And remember, that was part of the sense of containment. I think that some skills are more containing than others. To me, a very containing skill is the when-then statement. Let's just say your child leaves their toys lying around and they resist picking them up. There's no need to shout or to hurt or punish them. A when-then statement is usually very effective in this case. How to use it? You make something they do want to do dependent on that thing that they don't want to do. In the case of the toys lying around the room, it won't be long before the child comes to you and says, "Can I watch TV?" And you'll say, "When you've picked up your toys." So the when-then statement, when you've picked up your toys, then you can play outside. When you've tidied your room, then you can watch TV. You make something that they do want to do conditional on something that they were resisting doing. This is usually very effective, and you can hear from my tone of voice that I'm not sounding threatening or coercive or angry in any way. I'm simply putting it as a condition, and usually children cooperate at this point. There are other skills we'll be talking about which can be containing, and you can find more skills on our website, but that gives you some idea. So let's think about Razid. That rabbit is going to swallow you. Is it containing? Not at all. Razid can see that will never happen in a million years, and his mother's not presenting anything else which would motivate him not to go closer to the rabbit. What could his mother do? Perhaps she could start with some structure and say, "Razid, I don't want you to go too close to the rabbit. You can go as far as the edge of the path. I don't want you to walk between the flowers. All your toes need to be on the path." This is more containing for Razid because it tells him exactly how far is too far. She could also reach out to take his hand if he makes a move to go further, letting him know that she will not allow him to go closer to the rabbit. She could say, "Razid, that's far enough. Can you manage to stay on the path, or do you need to come and stand here with us?" So Razid will know that his freedom to go closer to the rabbit is dependent on him managing to stay within the limits, which is to stay on the path and not walk into the flower beds. If he were to start walking into the flower beds, he might find that his mother would take his hand and he'd end up standing further away with the family rather than adventuring a little closer on the path. What his mother's doing there is setting up the environment that it puts Razid in the best position to stay within the limits his mother gives him, because it allows him to go a little closer to the rabbit. Something we learn from behavioral science is that if we set up the environment so that it puts the child in the best position to behave well, that usually has a containing effect. If a child knows, I have a bit more freedom if I show that I can manage it well, and my parents do know how to stop me if I go out of control, then they will usually manage better. There are many skills which have a containing effect on children's behavior, and I'm looking forward to sharing those with you. I'm happy to report that threatening, shouting, hitting children or hurting them in any way are not active ingredients of good discipline. Worldwide, shouting at children is very, very common, but most of us can see that it does not have the desired effect on children's behavior. Shouting at children is actually not containing. Very often the behavior will continue until something else is done about the behavior. So if you were to use a when-then statement, for instance, you wouldn't need to shout at all. The when-then statement works as an active ingredient to motivate the behavior that you want, while a brief timeout can stop an aggressive behavior. So if you are an adult who had a punitive background yourself, rest assured that we can achieve the sense of containment that you had as a child, but at the same time keep a much better connection and a much greater sense of safety for the child than you had. You'll be able to achieve this using non-violent skills, and you'll be able to abandon things like hitting, shouting, and threatening, because these are not active ingredients of good discipline. That's all for now. If you would like to learn more about non-violent discipline, visit the Peace Discipline website at www.peacediscipline.com and subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching.